Autumn 1931. Knives and guns and magic were the tools of the day. It was the autumn of 1931, on the streets of a British city. Mr. Vasher watched, pipe smoke drifting before his eyes, as two men clearly out of place entered the spice market. They were pale-skinned among the dark tones of the Indians and other Southern Asian peoples who populated the Wednesday market, and while most tend to move about their business with eyes down, these two did not. They walked, heads upturned, and with their eyes roving over all that passed before them, without fear of indiscretion. Look at the clothes. It was the clothes that gave Mr. Vasher his greatest cause for concern. They were dressed as though on their way to a high-class wedding, in fine pale grey day suits with bright-toned pinstripes and shiny bowlers. You think you're fucking Americans now, do you? Thought Vasher with disgust. He knew the suits were meant for peacocking, to make a show. That was what all this was about. If they had come for a true confrontation, they would have turned up in numbers. But with only two of them, that meant something else. They had come to put on a display, to intimidate the locals and make themselves known. Mr. Vasher leant back in his chair, sat by the side of the stall now run by his son-in-law Rajan, and took a last draw of his pipe before tipping it out. The leader came with a saunter in his step, hands on his lapels and making a right spectacle of himself for all to see. His companion followed closely to his side, turning his head and eyes here and there with dulled malice. Vasher knew them both, Rowley the thuggish magician and his ghoulish companion Ithian. They arrived before him, doffing their hats with false propriety, Rowley with his ugly little smile. "Vasher," said Rowley, trying to be condescending but unable to hide his snicker. "Turd," thought Vasher. "I'm busy," he said flatly. "Get to your point or fuck off." Some might think it unwise to provoke two men who clearly came looking for a fight, but Mr. Vasher was never the sort to let preening gits scare him. The ghoul, Ithian, grey-skinned and with bloodshot eyes shrunken into their sockets, bared his black teeth. "Watch it," he snarled. "We only wanted a chat," smiled Rowley with his small and fat-lipped mouth. Rowley was the kind who loved to hear himself talk, but his accent was a confused mess of the Irish tongues of his ancestors and the Chestrian tones of his birthplace, and Vasher found it profoundly irritating. "We heard some rather upsetting rumours," said Rowley, trying to be coldly intimidating. "Word is your niece has been selling charms underhand, without permissions." Rowley opened his coat to show the metal of a knife under his right arm, and the wood of a wand under his left. "What would you know about that?" Mr. Vasher gave himself a moment. He withdrew the small spoon he used for cleaning out his pipe and began to scrape the waste out of the rounded chamber. When this was done, he pocketed both spoon and pipe and raised his gaze to the thug standing over him. He looked straight into the squirming, deranged little eyes of Rowley the magician and asked him plainly, "Why don't you pull a rabbit out of your arse?"